Breaking! Right now, in a development so explosive that parliamentary procedure has been suspended for only the fourth time since the Second World War, MI5 Director General Ken McCallum has gone on live television and confirmed what British intelligence has been investigating in silence for 11 months, that Chinese state intelligence agents have successfully infiltrated the Parliamentary Labour Party, that serving Labour MPs have been compromised, that classified government briefings have been passed to Beijing, and that the Prime Minister was informed of the infiltration 8 months ago, said nothing to Parliament, said nothing to the public, and continued to govern as though it had not happened. Starmer's credibility has not merely been damaged this morning, it has collapsed live on camera in real time in front of the country that elected him. McCallum did not schedule this, he did not request a press conference. He did not submit to the normal architecture of managed ministerial media engagement, through which intelligence chiefs occasionally make carefully controlled public statements on carefully selected topics, with carefully prepared lines that reveal nothing and reassure everyone. He arrived at the BBC's Millbank studios at 8:47 this morning for what had been briefed to the corporation as a background security environment update, the kind of routine engagement that produces 3 minutes of broadcast and no headlines. He sat down. He looked at the interviewer, and then he said something that no Director General of MI5 has ever said on live television to the British public. I need to be honest with the British people about something that I am no longer able to stay silent about in good conscience. The interviewer, BBC political correspondent Nick Robinson, later described the moment as the most unexpected sentence he has heard in 30 years of political broadcasting. He said nothing for 2 seconds, then he asked McCallum to continue. McCallum continued for 19 minutes. What he said in those 19 minutes has ended careers, opened criminal investigations, triggered the suspension of parliamentary business, sent the pound to a 6-year low, prompted emergency calls between the Five Eyes intelligence partners, caused 3 Labour MPs to turn off their phones and not turn them back on, and produced a silence from Number 10 so complete and so sustained that it has itself become the dominant fact of British political life this Tuesday morning. Here is what he confirmed. Beginning in late 2023, MI5's F branch, the division responsible for counter-espionage and the identification of foreign state actors operating within British institutional life, began receiving intelligence from a friendly allied service, indicating that a network of Chinese state intelligence operatives connected to the Ministry of State Security in Beijing had established active contact relationships with a number of individuals within the British Parliamentary Labour Party. The intelligence was initially assessed as preliminary contact relationships rather than confirmed agent relationships, meaning individuals being cultivated rather than individuals already under operational control. Standard counterintelligence protocol in such circumstances requires the relevant intelligence to be shared with the Prime Minister and the relevant cabinet ministers through the Joint Intelligence Committee briefing process, which was done in the 3rd week of October last year. The Prime Minister was told. He received a formal written JIC assessment. He received a verbal briefing from McCallum personally. He was informed that Chinese intelligence was actively cultivating Labour MPs. He was advised of the specific risk categories, classified briefing material, policy influence, parliamentary positioning on legislation affecting Chinese commercial and strategic interests in Britain. He was given a preliminary list of individuals assessed as at elevated risk of cultivation, and he was asked to authorize a series of counterintelligence measures including restricted briefing access for certain MPs, enhanced protective security advice for others, and a carefully managed disclosure to the Intelligence and Security Committee. The Prime Minister authorized none of it. He restricted access to the JIC assessment to 3 advisors. He did not inform the Cabinet. He did not inform the Home Secretary. He did not inform the Intelligence and Security Committee, whose statutory function includes oversight of exactly this category of threat. He did not inform the MPs who appeared on the preliminary risk list that they were being targeted by a foreign intelligence service. And he issued an internal instruction, documented in a Cabinet Office memorandum that McCallum produced on camera this morning, and held up for the nation to see that the matter was to be handled in the Prime Minister's own written words with maximum discretion given the political sensitivity of the timing. Maximum discretion, political sensitivity. Those are the words a Prime Minister used when told that Chinese intelligence was infiltrating his parliamentary party. Not national security, not public duty, not the obligation to Parliament or the electorate, political sensitivity, the timing, his political interests, his assessment of what was convenient. For 8 months while Parliament sat and debated and voted and legislated, while Labour MPs attended classified briefings on national security, defence and foreign policy, while the Intelligence and Security Committee conducted its oversight work on the basis that the executive was sharing with it everything it needed to know. For 8 months, the Prime Minister sat on intelligence confirming that Chinese state agents were actively working to compromise his own parliamentary party. And he said nothing to anyone who needed to know. And then this morning Ken McCallum decided that 8 months was long enough. The specific details McCallum confirmed about the infiltration network are the details that have turned Westminster from a place of political crisis into something closer to a genuine national security emergency. the Chinese intelligence operation did not target Labour MPs randomly. It targeted them with precision, patience, and an understanding of the British parliamentary system sophisticated enough to indicate either very good human intelligence sources inside Westminster or a very long period of preparatory surveillance, possibly both. The targets were identified and approached based on their committee memberships, their policy portfolios, their financial situations, their personal vulnerabilities, and their access to classified material. The operation prioritized MPs serving on 4 specific parliamentary committees: the Intelligence and Security Committee, the Defense Select Committee, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and the Science and Technology Committee, because those 4 committees collectively receive briefings on the most sensitive areas of British national security, defense procurement, intelligence methodology, and technology policy. The approach methodology used by Chinese intelligence was documented in the MI5 assessment and described by McCallum in terms specific enough to constitute a public warning. It involved 3 primary vectors. First, academic and think tank relationships. Chinese state-linked research institutions and policy organizations offering speaking engagements, research partnerships, fellowship programs, and consultancy arrangements to MPs and their staff, creating financial relationships and personal loyalties that could be developed over time. Second, business introduction networks. Chinese commercial entities with state intelligence links facilitating introductions to business opportunities, investment discussions, and commercial relationships that created financial entanglement and the social architecture of obligation and reciprocity. Third, and most seriously, direct personal relationships cultivated through social environments, including individuals specifically deployed to develop personal intimacy with targeted MPs over periods measured in years rather than months. The number of Labour MPs assessed by MI5 as having moved beyond preliminary contact relationships into active cultivation, meaning relationships where Chinese intelligence has established sufficient leverage or loyalty to make requests and receive responses, stands according to McCallum's confirmed statement this morning at 9. 9 serving Labour MPs are assessed by MI5 as actively compromised by Chinese state intelligence. Their names have not been disclosed publicly. McCallum confirmed that their names have been provided this morning in a classified communication to the Intelligence and Security Committee, the Speaker of the House of Commons, the Lord Chief Justice, and the Leader of the Opposition. He confirmed that the Metropolitan Police Special Branch has been notified. He confirmed that the Crown Prosecution Service has been advised. And he confirmed, with the particular care of a man who understands the legal weight of every word he uses, that the investigation is at a stage where criminal charges are being actively considered. 9 members of Parliament. 9 people who were elected by British constituencies, who take their seats in the chamber, who vote on legislation, who receive classified intelligence briefings, who serve on committees overseeing national security, 9 of them assessed by the Director General of MI5 as actively compromised by a foreign government. And the Prime Minister knew for 8 months, and chose political sensitivity over national security. The moment that will be played for years, the moment that defines this morning the way certain moments define mornings in political history, came at the 22-minute mark of McCallum's interview. Robinson asked him directly, "Did the Prime Minister understand when he received your briefing in October that this was a matter he was constitutionally obliged to disclose to Parliament?" McCallum paused. The pause lasted 3 seconds. On live television, 3 seconds is not a pause. It is a statement. Then he said, "The Prime Minister understood everything I told him, everything." Those 5 words, "the Prime Minister understood everything I told him, everything," not "I believe the Prime Minister understood," not "the briefing was comprehensive." The Prime Minister understood everything, everything. A serving intelligence chief on live television confirming beyond any ambiguity that the failure to disclose was not a failure of communication or comprehension. It was a choice, a deliberate, informed, politically motivated choice to keep from Parliament and the public the intelligence that Chinese agents had infiltrated the governing party. In the 31 minutes since that sentence was broadcast, the following has happened. The Speaker of the House of Commons suspended the day's parliamentary business and issued an emergency summons requiring the Prime Minister to appear before the chamber within 2 hours. 3 cabinet ministers requested emergency meetings with the cabinet secretary. The Leader of the House informed the Speaker's office that she could not confirm the Prime Minister's availability. The Speaker's office informed the Leader of the House that availability was not the question. The Conservative Party tabled an emergency motion of no confidence. The Liberal Democrats, SNP, Reform UK, and Plaid Cymru indicated they would support it. The parliamentary arithmetic of what follows from that combination requires no analysis. It requires only counting. The cabinet meeting that was supposed to happen at 10 a.m. this morning to discuss autumn spending allocations did not happen. Ministers arrived at the cabinet office. They waited. The cabinet secretary entered the room at 10:03, stood at the head of the table, and told the assembled cabinet that the meeting was postponed pending urgent discussions. He did not say what discussions. He did not say with whom. He did not say when the cabinet would reconvene. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who by constitutional convention is the minister with primary responsibility for domestic intelligence oversight and whose entire departmental authority rests on the premise that she is informed of significant domestic intelligence matters, asked the cabinet secretary directly whether she had been informed of the October briefing. The cabinet secretary said he was not in a position to discuss the contents of JIC assessments in a cabinet setting. She asked him whether that was a yes or a no. He said he was not in a position to characterize it as either. She stood up and left the room. 3 other ministers left with her. The Home Secretary has not been seen publicly since. Among the ordinary people this morning who are trying to understand what it means to learn that the people who represent them in Parliament may have been working knowingly or not in the service of a foreign government, the reaction is not primarily political. It is something more fundamental and more difficult to process. It is the reaction of people who were taught that their democracy was one thing and are being shown this morning that it was something else. Carol Eastwood, a 64-year-old retired civil servant from Guildford, spent 29 years working in the Home Office. She processed security clearances. She understood better than most citizens what the architecture of British state security is supposed to look like and what it is supposed to protect. She watched McCallum's interview on her laptop at her kitchen table and then sat without moving for several minutes. When she called her daughter to describe what she had seen, she found she did not have the language for it immediately. She said, "I spent 30 years working for the idea that the system works, that the oversight is real, that when something like this happens there are mechanisms, and this morning I watched the man who runs MI5 go on television because the mechanisms failed, because the Prime Minister was one of the mechanisms and he closed himself." She paused. "What do you do when the system that's supposed to catch this is the thing that needed catching?" Raymond Ashford, a 71-year-old former Army intelligence officer from Shrewsbury who served 2 tours in Northern Ireland during the Troubles and understands the operational reality of counterintelligence in a way that no civilian briefing can fully convey, was contacted by a journalist this morning after his name appeared on a veterans' commentary list. He said, with the economy of language of someone who spent a career measuring words against their consequences, 9 MPs compromised and the Prime Minister sat on it for 8 months for political reasons. In my day, in my world, that is not a political problem, that is a criminal problem, that is a treason-adjacent problem. I don't use that word lightly, I'm using it now. Michael Obi, a 58-year-old secondary school history teacher from Bristol who has taught British political history for 30 years, was supervising a free period when a colleague showed him the McCallum interview on their phone. He watched it in silence, handed the phone back and went to the window. After a moment he said, "I've taught the Cambridge spy ring, I've taught the Profumo affair, I've taught every major breach of British institutional trust in the 20th century. And the thing I always told my students was that the system eventually corrects. The whistleblower comes, the press publishes, Parliament acts, the system corrects." He turned from the window. "I'm going to have to think carefully about how I teach it from now on. These are not people making partisan calculations. These are people whose relationship with the idea of their country is being revised in real time by what they saw on their screens this morning." The international dimension of McCallum's confirmation has activated every alarm in every allied intelligence service simultaneously. The Five Eyes partners, the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, received emergency notifications from GCHQ at 9:04 this morning before McCallum's interview was even complete, under the protocol that requires immediate allied notification when a significant domestic intelligence breach is publicly disclosed. The American response came from the Director of National Intelligence's office rather than the State Department, a choice of institutional speaker that signals this is being treated in Washington as an intelligence matter rather than a diplomatic one. The statement said the United States was urgently assessing the implications of the disclosed intelligence for shared operational security, and that all current intelligence sharing protocols with British agencies were under immediate review pending that assessment. That language means something specific and serious. It means that every classified intelligence product the United States has shared with Britain, every assessment, every operation, every source identification, every target package, is now being reviewed for potential compromise against the possibility that some of it passed through the briefing rooms where those 9 MPs had access. The operational security implications of 9 compromised parliamentary committee members, sitting on the Intelligence and Security Committee and the Defense Select Committee receiving classified briefings over an extended period, are not theoretical. They are concrete, they are specific, and every intelligence partner Britain has is currently trying to calculate exactly how concrete and how specific. Germany's Federal Intelligence Service issued a one-sentence statement. "We are in urgent consultation with allied partners." France's DGSE said nothing publicly and immediately recalled its intelligence liaison officer from the British Embassy in Paris for consultations, a diplomatic signal so pointed it requires no translation. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation issued a formal statement noting that it had suspended active intelligence sharing with the British domestic services pending clarification of the security environment. In 40 years of Five Eyes cooperation, ASIO has never publicly suspended intelligence sharing with a partner service. It has done it this morning. The financial markets have priced the morning's events with their usual brutal efficiency. The pound fell 2.9% against the dollar in the first 20 minutes after McCallum's interview ended, its sharpest single-session decline since the Truss mini-budget of September 2022. British government bond yields rose sharply as institutional investors reassessed political risk premiums on UK sovereign debt. Defence stocks with classified government contracts fell an average of 19% as the market calculated the cost of the security reviews and contract reassessments that will inevitably follow from the disclosure of 9 compromised parliamentary committee members. Cybersecurity and intelligence consultancy stocks surged 17% on the opposite calculation. The remediation of this damage will cost billions and someone will be paid to do it. Goldman Sachs issued an emergency client note at 10:30 describing UK political risk as having entered a category it had not previously modelled and advising significant reduction of exposure to British assets pending political stabilisation. It noted that stabilisation could not be assessed or predicted under current circumstances. It did not identify a stabilisation scenario. That absence was itself the assessment. The legal architecture that is being assembled around this morning's revelations is moving simultaneously on more tracks than any single legal team can monitor. The most constitutionally significant development came at 11:15 when the Attorney General, the government's own chief legal officer, the minister whose role includes advising the Prime Minister on his constitutional obligations and legal exposure, issued a statement that Downing Street did not authorize, did not clear, and apparently did not know was coming. The statement said, the Attorney General is conducting an urgent review of the constitutional obligations that apply to a Prime Minister upon receipt of intelligence of the nature described in this morning's public disclosure, and the legal consequences that may flow from a determination that those obligations were not met. 13 words from a Chancellor yesterday. Now the government's own top lawyer conducting an urgent review of whether the Prime Minister broke his constitutional obligations. The building is not merely on fire. The building's own fire brigade is assessing whether arson charges apply. Nigel Farage appeared outside Parliament at 11:30. He had been there since 10:15, moving through the crowd that had gathered, speaking to people, listening to people, doing the thing that politicians in moments of institutional collapse either instinctively understand how to do or do not. He finally addressed the cameras not with a speech but with a question. A single question delivered in the voice of a man who believes he already knows every answer but understands that the power of the moment lies in making the public ask it for themselves. He said, Ken McCallum told you this morning that Chinese intelligence agents have been inside your parliament. Inside the party of government, sitting on the committees that oversee your nuclear weapons, your intelligence services, your military procurement. And the man you elected to protect you from exactly that, the man whose one non-negotiable duty is the security of this nation, knew about it for 8 months and decided his political convenience mattered more than your safety. He paused, looked directly at the cameras. What do you call a Prime Minister who does that? He said nothing else. He walked back through the crowd. The crowd answered his question themselves loudly for several minutes after he left. Kemi Badenoch's statement was delivered at the dispatch box at noon during the emergency parliamentary session the Speaker had convened in the absence of the Prime Minister who had been summoned to attend it. She held the Cabinet Office Memorandum, McCallum's evidence, the document bearing the instruction for maximum discretion given political sensitivity, reproduced in laminate for the Chamber to see, as her predecessor had held the Sentinel authorization document days before. The Chamber was learning what it looked like when a government's own paperwork became the instrument of its destruction. She said, the Prime Minister knew. He has known for 8 months. He knew that Chinese intelligence was operating inside his party, compromising his colleagues, accessing classified material that is supposed to be among the most protected information in this country. He knew, and he made a choice, not the choice his constitutional office required of him. Not the choice his duty to Parliament required of him, not the choice his most basic obligation to the British people required of him. He made the choice that was most convenient for Keir Starmer, and that choice has compromised the security of every person in this country and every ally we have. She placed the document on the dispatch box. He must resign today, not tomorrow, today. The Chamber's response to those words, the volume, the duration, the quality of it, told anyone watching that the parliamentary arithmetic was no longer the question. The parliamentary arithmetic was a formality. What the Chamber communicated in that moment was that it had reached a collective judgment and the judgment was irreversible. Formal leadership challenge letters, the mechanism by which the Labour Party initiates a mandatory leadership review, have been confirmed at 51 submissions as of the time this broadcast was prepared. The threshold is 38. It was crossed 90 minutes ago. A mandatory leadership review is now constitutionally obligatory under Labour Party rules. The review process, once triggered, requires a ballot of the full party membership. It takes weeks, but the triggering is irrevocable. Whatever happens next, resignation, confidence vote, criminal investigation, Allied intelligence suspension, the Labour Party has formally initiated the process of removing its own leader. The parliamentary party that elected Keir Starmer has voted in the only way currently available to it to end his leadership. The Prime Minister has still not spoken. It has been 1 hour and 47 minutes since McCallum said the words, the Prime Minister understood everything I told him. Everything 1 hour and 47 minutes since those words went into the air on live national television, and began the process of dismantling the credibility of a man who built his entire political identity on the idea that he understood things, that he was serious, that he was the safe pair of hands, that he was the adult in the room, that he was competent and trustworthy, and would never play political games with the security of the country. 1 hour and 47 minutes of silence in response to those 5 words, and in that silence everything that needs to be said is being said, by the Home Secretary who walked out of the Cabinet room, by the Attorney General conducting her urgent review, by the 51 MPs who submitted their letters, by the Allied intelligence services suspending their sharing protocols, by the markets pricing in a political risk they cannot model. By the Father of the House sitting in the chamber with the still patience of someone who has seen everything and is watching now the last thing. Carol Eastwood is at her kitchen table in Guildford trying to find language for what the system looks like when it fails. Raymond Ashford is in Shrewsbury using a word he does not use lightly. Michael Obi is at a window in Bristol thinking about how he teaches this from now on. And 9 people who were elected by British constituencies to represent British people in the British Parliament have had their names given this morning to the Lord Chief Justice, the Speaker, the Metropolitan Police and the Crown Prosecution Service, and Keir Starmer is silent, and Britain knows what that silence means, and Britain is deciding what to do about it.